This is a big event for us to be able to host budget hearings for the 2022 budget. I'd like to thank our team. There's just, dozens of people who work on this throughout the county at different points in time in the process, but it's certainly a lot of work, but it's also a really enjoyable process, and it's something we really enjoy bringing before you all. We're going to kick off with just a little bit of an overview. Cammie's put together some slides, and I think we're kind of probably both going to talk through different pieces of them in terms of just to help set the context for the budget and start off from there. And then do commissioners have a schedule for today's hearings? And then after that, we will move on to criminal justice services. Mike Brower is joining us via Zoom, and he will be leading us through the criminal justice, public safety, and justice related departments today. And then hopefully we'll wrap up with a small conversation on admin at the end of the day. So Cammie, can you share the PowerPoint? And there you go. Okay, here we go.
So this is just a budget overview of the general fund changes that we have information about. The revenues and assessed growth for 2022 impacted the budget through sales tax being stable and increasing slightly for 2021. The registered deeds fees, the collection increases as the home sales market is rising, and the mortgage refinance filings make a difference since these are per page count fees. The 2022 assessed value growth overall was 2.75%. That's actually pretty low historically for Douglas County, but it did bring an ad valorem property tax of additional $1.7 million. I've listed the historical growth closer to last year's value growth of 4.85%. This is just a slide about the beginning fund balance for our major levied funds mostly. We did also put the mental health sales tax on the bottom of this list since it's a newer revenue source.
On that one specifically, fund balance is pretty significantly impacted by bond proceeds that are sitting in the fund. So and until we finish the development of the crisis center. So that's one of the reasons why the fund balance in that fund sits at a higher amount. Also with fund balance, some of the smaller funds have higher fund balances, and sometimes that's just a reflection of the size of the budget overall. One of the things that we talked that this budget did was a small bit of mill levy realignment from the special building fund, and that was on here pretty much. I think we trimmed a little bit off of employee benefits and road and bridge as well. The ambulance fund, and there'll be more conversation about ambulance as we move through. The increase for the 2022 budget is reflected inside the general fund because that's where the transfer comes through to support the ambulance fund. It's sort of difficult because I think sometimes people assume it's going to be in the ambulance fund, but it comes to the general. There's a mill levy cap on the ambulance fund, which is why we can't levy it there, but we can levy it in general. I think I've discussed this with commissioners. If things hold in terms of how we think the LDCFM budget comes together, I don't anticipate that we will have an ambulance fund for 2023. We would then eliminate the fund, move those expenses into the general fund. We'll probably take that opportunity to look at some consolidation of other funds as well. Perhaps special building is the one I'm thinking of at that point to go ahead and just consolidate into general and just streamline what you all see and what we all have to manage.
Right, and for those reasons, these percentages of total fund make sense for different reasons. we made a list of the big transfers that we have that come out of the general fund for the 2022 budget. Ambulance fund, of course, gets that big transfer because we are required to transfer anything over the 3 mills that we need to make that fund operational. The CIP transfer to capital improvements fund is $4.1 million. And equipment reserves, this is a new line that we've kind of added. It's about 17 different general fund departments. It's what you'll see within their line item budgets. It's right around $500,000. And then the sales tax fund that supports debt and bonds gets half of the sales tax from the general. We made a sheet for the cost for the city of Lawrence. These numbers all reflect the numbers that were given to us by the city of Lawrence. So I'll point out why that makes a difference here in a second. But the health department building maintenance, we gave you the city estimate for 2022 and the actuals for 2021 that we paid. We pay 50% of those costs. The household hazardous waste is just a set amount right now, and we pay that set amount that they give us. Planning department, the cost is for 1/6 of the planning department, and those numbers are there. The city shared CIP information I listed below that is for FY 2022. They had nothing listed for 2023. They said that this does not include anything for LDCFM, so they're referring to the capital that's within the actual fund that we discussed during the ambulance. But you'll see that there is driveway sealant listed for the fire med facilities that they're anticipating for 2022, and a design fee for Wakarusa Extended. They have us at 0. I think that they don't intend for us to give a portion during this part of their designing. We do have CIP funds set aside, and we do anticipate that we are part of the 27th and Wakarusa extension. For 2023, they had nothing listed for shared county portions. Okay, so this spreadsheet is,
Yeah.
I work in too many spreadsheets. This slide is the supplemental request and how they were funded. So I have 3 different slides to show you where the funding came from in the proposed budget. This one is mill levy growth and mill levy realignment. So anywhere that there was room in the mill levy to make the addition, we have the compensation study and administration. We have market merit and longevity for the entire county employees, and we have the behavioral health projects, just the little amount that ART is helping the homeless to maintain their housing expansion. We have 1 FTE for an account clerk 2 for the county clerk's office. And we have the 5 FTE for emergency communications. And again, that's just our portion that the budget went up because we had already accounted for those some years back. With the criminal justice capital reallocated mill levy, this is money that was set aside for criminal justice capital. This would be the amount that has been taken out of that. The funding was provided for the proposed budget for the human services navigation manager. That's 1 FTE plus some money for the position to function. The Burton Ash Homeless Services request, the criminal justice services embedding a Heartland Rate Act ICC within their adult services. The drug court expansion funds that are just held in the commissioners for further discussion. The indigent defense funds that are held in the commissioner's budget for further discussion. The Lawrence Humane Society Animal Code implementation. The continuance of the health equity planner position that's currently at the Lawrence Douglas County Public Health. That's a portion of that position. The sheriff department, the jail, for 1 correctional officer for video appearances and 1 cook. The transfer to CIP, the additional money for transfer to CIP, and then 1 FTE planner for zoning. Those were all within the criminal justice capital. And this is our last one, and it is the mental health sales tax fund and what it funded. This list, I will admit, may not be complete. This is just what were the new ventures, and Bob can fill you in more on a complete picture of what that fund pays for, and he has that information in the budget book. But we have the Burton Ash Mobile Access Team. We have the DECA uninsured men's treatment for 10 additional clients. We have Heartland Radak recovery coach and an ICC supervisor. And we have the mobile crisis call center from the Kansas Suicide Prevention Headquarters. And that is the overview of the administration portion of the proposed budget.
If the commissioners don't have any questions, we can, do you have
I have
any
a quick question.
Yeah.
So back on your slide on planning, Cammie, that's a pretty big difference between what the city gave us as a budget and what the ending balance was. Do we have any information from the city on why that's so different, or am I reading that incorrectly?
No, you're reading it correctly. The city added additional staff in 2020 outside of the budget process. And then my assumption is it also includes the administrative fee portion or the internal
does. Service
fee portion. When we received that amount from the city, it was a substantial increase. It is not included in the proposed budget in front of you. The commissioners are aware that we have a number of agreements that we're working on with the city of Lawrence. I think this is one that is pretty close to the top of the list to discuss. If 1/6 is an accurate representation of what it is that we ask metropolitan planning to do for the county and the city. And I've had conversations with the city manager. He's aware that we are not including that full request in the proposed budget. And he feels confident that we can work out something in terms of how that goes. I don't like moving into a budget process and having something where there could be a more substantial increase not worked out. But at this point, I just don't have enough information. And I think it's going to take a lot of time to really get into the planning conversation and determine really what is the appropriate amount. So we decided to just leave it out for now, and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Anybody else have any questions? Great. Well, we can go ahead and move into hearings. Now, this is a slightly different format that we've done in the past. So I've asked administration staff to help walk commissioners provide an overview of the department budget. And then folks are here for additional questions, and you can just come to the microphone and when we get to that portion. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Brower, who's joining us via Zoom, to start with the overview of criminal justice services. Mike?
Good morning, commissioners. And so I will be walking you through, I'll be with you all morning, walking you through the various criminal justice partners' budgets, and then leadership will be joining for discussion and your questions. And so we'll, as Sarah said, we'll start with criminal justice services and their budget. I'm be referring to the budget narrative, page 12. Their budget is broken down into 3 sections: operations, adult services, and youth services. And so we'll begin with the operations section, which is, as I said, page 12 in your budget narrative. So you see there, beginning with the list of revenues, there are a small grant that we have for the regional collaboration grant for a Kansas vocational training scholarship program. That's to offer scholarship, small scholarship amounts of money to people who have completed high school, who are working with the juvenile justice system. Then also we did not receive any new reimbursements from the state. And then there is a listing there of reimbursements that we received from other counties who do not have juvenile detention centers. So for personnel, there are just no new additions, just projected increases for market adjustments. The only contractual change is for Midco. We'll be raising the rate for the 1006 New Hampshire facility. No changes in commodities, capital outlay, transfers, or miscellaneous. So any questions in that section of the Criminal Justice Services budget? Great. I'm really very capable of handling no questions. So we'll move into adult services. And so for they do not receive any revenues. So that is not part of this budget section. For personnel, strictly just adjusted for projected market increases for personnel overtime. Then for contractual, one change to note, their budget line 60835, which has been titled housing assistance. They're going to be changing that to barrier reduction. And this really is because as we've operated several of the alternatives to incarceration, which are funded out of this line, we've learned that people have a lot more needs than just strictly housing. And so those are listed in the summary, such as education, employment, training, different treatment needs. And so wanted to change the title line of that budget line to be more reflective of how it's utilized. For professional services, 2 years or about a year and a half ago, we implemented starting to use the grant risk assessment tool for looking at admission into our drug court program. We want to increase that as we'll be utilizing the grant with the district attorney's office to for placement into all of the alternative incarceration programs that are offered through this budget. Then for legal defense, there will be some increase in the numbers because we've added the enhanced diversion program and in anticipation of more people being admitted into the drug court program. For commodities, those are listed there. Going to be just a real bit of a reduction in that budget line, and that's based on what the Director Pam Legion has seen over the last 3 years. Then reduction in uniform cost, and there'll be just a slight increase in client supplies. And once again, I really think this is a reflection of the kind of merging changes in philosophy of providing more of a case management style of supervision to the clients receiving services there with adult services. No changes in capital outlay. And then there is a transfer to note, and that is from budget line 91020, the DECA line. As you know, the district attorney's office decided not to continue the women's substance use disorder program. And instead, those individuals receiving services previous to that program will be receiving services through enhanced diversion drug court or behavioral health court as it best meets the needs of the client. So, any questions on that section of criminal justice services?
The only thing I'd add, commissioners, is, Mike mentioned the reduction for the women's SUD program. It's important to note that when we set funds aside, when in the commissioner's budget for the expansion of drug court, in essence, there was $110,000 being spent on programs of this nature, not exactly the same type of program. So that amount of 250, even though it was taken out of reallocated costs, the reduction of that 110 helped overall mill levy expense and allowed us to do some other things internally there. So I think it is fair to sort of think about, we had 110 before and now we have 250 from cuts. Does that make sense? I know I may have just confused the issue, but I wanted to make sure commissioners understood that, you know, there was $110,000 going towards programs that now will go through drug court and enhanced diversion.
And so that is saying it's going to go to all of our alternatives to incarceration programs. So not just drug court, but enhanced
Agreed.
diversion, drug court, potentially behavioral health court, and
Agreed.
other potential programs that fall into alternatives.
Agreed. Yeah.
The other clarification I would
That
make,
on.
I don't know. Says it's on. I think the light's on. Can you
Yeah,
hear
maybe
me?
you just needs to raise it up because I just didn't pick you up very well.
I'm not a musician. I have no idea how
I
to do
don't
that.
know. Yeah. Just sorry.
The other clarification I would make is the legal defense funds have been moved to the court. So we don't actually have them in our budget any longer. That's a change from previous budget years.
Yeah. As commissioners are aware of, under the tax lid, which was the way the county budget was prepared for 2021, programs associated with that were associated with public safety could be exempt from the tax lid. Criminal justice services was viewed as public safety. The district court was not. So we sometimes consolidated programs under certain departments where it made it more advantageous for the tax lid. Now that the tax lid is gone, we can reflect those legal defense costs back to the district court budget.
I need you to walk me through this a little slower because I'm trying to catch up. Maybe everybody else gets it. So one of my questions, like, I think you addressed, like, what happened to the money for women's diversion? Is that the 110 you're talking about?
Correct. The 110,000 for women's diversion just fell to, in essence, a fund balance. So I could reallocate that mill levy internally
Okay.
to make the base budget work.
So then we have supplemental request for 181,000 for expanded drug court. And
There are a number of requests in your packet related to drug court,
right.
and all of them together. At the time when I was trying to prepare this budget, I didn't have all of that lined out and I had to
Okay.
make some decisions pretty quickly. So we took $250,000 of the reallocated funds set aside for jail expansion and set aside $250,000 of that, placed it in the commissioner's budget for drug court and enhanced diversion options.
Okay.
So those will sit in your budget until you feel comfortable that the program is where you want it and that you're supportive of how we're going to expand both of those programs. And I think we can get more into that supplemental here in a minute.
Okay. I'll wait.
Okay, that
Patiently.
was my question. Are we
Okay.
discussing supplemental now or do we
No.
need to wait? Okay.
If there's anything else, then I think we can get into the supplemental. Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead,
I
Pam.
think the approach was going to be, what Sarah and I had talked about was the 250,000 was going to be used for all the DECA program services for enhanced diversion or drug court. That obviously isn't 100%. And when we looked historically at what we've been doing, we obviously don't pay 100% of the cost. DECA was kind enough to provide me with information about kind of what other payee sources they have for our clients. The issue for us is it's really hard to predict. Drug court was in a new year during pandemic. We're still in the kind of the pilot phase. Then the women's diversion program was also not ever fully operational, and then now it's gone. Then enhanced diversion, we just started in February, and it's been a kind of a slow process as we kind of get everybody on board with it. And the district attorney's office is now fully staffed, so we anticipate getting more referrals as the staffing is increased. What we don't know is how many people on enhanced diversion would need drug and alcohol services or treatment services. And so what we're anticipating is that drug court and BHC will have at least 85% of the folks will not have other payer sources. And so that remaining 100, the other 15% we would use towards enhanced diversion clients. And so Sandra Dixon's here today from DECA, and we've already talked about, we're going to do a monthly manage of where we're at. Obviously, specialty courts will be priority over enhanced diversion clients because we made a promise that they're going to get those services. But we feel like we're going to have money. Okay, thank you. We feel like that extra money, and we're anticipating about 50, well, I've got too much paper here. We're anticipating that we think, you know, at the 85% rate, we'll have about $52,000 to help with enhanced diversion clients that need treatment or assessment services going forward in 2022. So it's a different kind of philosophy about managing the money. I think the concern has been, your concern is about the cost, and Sarah's concern is we're budgeting more than we're spending. And so what we're trying to do is find where's that median ground, what's a good prediction of what other payer sources will be versus how many people we can help. So we're going to manage the money a little differently than we have in the past, and hopefully that's going to serve more folks and not leave money sitting on the table that could have been used for clients. So it's kind of a different approach than we've had in the past. I'll try and answer your questions, if that makes sense to you.
That makes sense. My question was actually about the embedded Heartland RADAC intensive care coordinator. And so I
Yes.
don't know if we want to discuss that first, or if I can just jump into questions. Which would you prefer?
You go ahead.
Okay. I think I've been really trying to wrap my head around how our drug court is different than other drug courts across the country. And I was kind of surprised when I read the description for the Heartland RADAC care coordinator, because a lot of these services around wraparound support and holistic support are things that probation officers do in many other drug courts. And when I looked at the supplemental request for the Heartland RADAC care coordinator, it's significantly more than even adding another probation officer to the office. And one of the kind of expanded benefits of having a specialty court within a criminal justice services office is that sometimes some of these good practices rub off when it comes to just general supervision. So when it comes to showing that, you know, sometimes people need housing in order to stay within the expectations of probation, when we have better employment practices, all of the pro-social behaviors that come up, it seems like this is really focusing on those pro-social behaviors and support systems. And I'm wondering why we're doing that as kind of a contracted out service rather than training and support for POs within criminal justice services to focus on some of that care coordination.
Well, I think that my thought was it's kind of a specialized, the drug and alcohol component, the care coordination is something that RADAC's already demonstrated that they have a really great program for. My thinking was that drug court and behavioral health clients get a lot of supports from my staff and a lot of financial supports through some of the funding that the commission has given us to help them maintain housing, to get them things to help them maintain a job, those kind of things. But my concern is that the clients on community corrections, enhanced diversion, court services could benefit from having somebody help get some of these things coordinated. I mean, it's really complex because some of our clients have multiple things going on at the same time. And my concern is that I want people to fail so that they get additional service. And so that's kind of my thinking behind it. I really hadn't thought about bringing it in-house. I mean, it's not really an area of specialty for me.
Yeah, and I think that when it comes to actual treatment, drug treatment, that's something that is well beyond kind of something we can do in-house, right? That's where we need to contract out, make sure that we have treatment providers who have those specialty skills. But when it comes to care coordination and kind of help with some of those holistic pieces and wraparound services, I hear what you're saying, and I completely agree that I think that there are clients who may not be served by specialty courts or enhanced diversion that would greatly benefit, and they'd be less likely to recidivate because they had these supports. And so when we can bring it in-house, whether it's saying, here's one PO that kind of has experience navigating or is developing those skills, or if we bring that training in for all of our POs to know how to connect clients to services, then it's more likely that those clients actually get the services, because their first point of contact with their probation officer means that they're being connected to services. And it would be, I mean, looking at the budget, it'd be a cost savings for the county, because instead of saying we need to contract out that coordination, we're investing in our own people and investing in that professional development so that we're providing it and doing it at a lower rate than kind of contracting out and overhead in those pieces.
Yeah, and I think part of the cost that's built into the rate act is just the startup piece. And then there's a 15,000 for client assistance, which we're going to actually keep in our budget to assist clients with. And I think we gave some examples in the narrative, helping people get the tools to have a job and just some basic stuff. Sometimes it doesn't amount to a lot, but it's huge in terms of the client's ability to be successful.
Oh, I
don't have
totally agree.
any-
Those are the things that make it so that people have access to employment or don't. And that
Huge.
makes sure that we can keep people from recidivating.
Yeah, I don't have really any like preconceived thing that I have to have somebody outside or inside. I'm happy to do whatever you think would work best. I mean, our drug court works a little differently than some of the ones across the state, because a lot of the ones across the state are built on SB 123 clients who have a payee source. Well, our focus isn't really on that group. We have some people in drug court who qualify for Senate Bill 123, but we also have a lot of people who don't. So we didn't want to make that a criterion, because we already felt like those people already have a support network to get those services and have a payer, whereas a lot of our other clients don't have and don't qualify for SB 123.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I find really beneficial about these specialty courts is that it provides a different way to look at support for clients and a different way to think about all of the clients we serve. So while drug court is really focused on addiction treatment,
Right.
there's also that connection to other holistic supports. There are plenty of clients who may not have addiction treatment, but may still need tools to get that job or pro-social skills. And when we think about bringing that in from kind of a contractor, then the PO has to know, I have to contact this other person. There are administrative burdens for the client. If we have the probation officers who are ready to help with some of those pieces and connections, I think we can have better outcomes for all of our clients, whether they're in the specialty courts or not.
Yeah, our intent was to house it at community corrections so that they could be meeting with the client, with their probation officer, and getting those things going. I mean, it can be whatever you want to design it to be. I just think that we need more help getting people to care. And yeah.
Okay, this is Mike Breyer. Can I chime in here real quick? So this is something we've actually been talking about for over 5 years, and I want to just a couple of points is one is please think of this position to be very separate from the two specialty courts. This position is not designed to be serving the specialty courts. And then the other piece is the difference between this position and a probation officer is this is a licensed clinician. So this person has the ability to screen someone for hospitalization, to complete the KCPC, Kansas assessment for drug and alcohol services, which opens the door to block grant funding and admission to outpatient or inpatient services. This person then, while we do offer cognitive behavioral interventions for substance abuse as a program at community corrections, this person will be a clinician teaching that class alongside a probation officer, which is going to improve our staff's skill set in doing that. And this really gained momentum for us as a recommendation from the 2019 report from the CSG Justice Center. This is one of their high priorities that they thought would help us to improve the success rate of people completing probation. And the idea is that in the, and most of you have been to our facility at 1006, where all of our probation officers sit in the little cubicle farm, and we will have a clinician sitting there in the cubicle with the probation officers. And so this is a real opportunity to as you said, Commissioner Portillo, to help our officers learn more skills about recognizing symptoms of mental illness, symptoms of substance abuse, co-occurring disorder, to become more acquainted with the community resources, which is something that, you know, the state of Kansas has been really pushing for the last 15 years and required trainings for our probation departments. And honestly, you know, after 15 years of this, we're still not where we want to be. And so we hope that this kind of influence in our office will just open more doors for our staff and for the clients that we serve.
Just wanted to expand, because this is a conversation I think that has been going on between criminal justice services and behavioral health with Mike. And I think one of the advantages to this approach is that it provides a dedicated person within the criminal justice system, criminal justice services, to do the type of work we've been doing in the community, right? And at the same time, it provides that person to provide continuity of care after the person leaves the criminal justice system, right? So if you think about it, what we're proposing within the behavioral health projects budget is to add a care coordinator because our referrals merit that. And then we also have a need to do this bridging between criminal justice experience. And so what you have is you have that team, right? And the members of that team can be leveraged for that continuity of care. So that if a person has graduated from behavioral health court and now they show up in the emergency department, when the care coordinators are working with that person, they have continuity history with that person and are more likely to be able to solve problems in the community that then that person doesn't wind back up in the criminal justice system. So I think this is an example of kind of evolving thinking and coordination that we've been talking about between these kind of three areas. So I just wanted to put that into the mix here because we're trying to have this kind of system spanning, right, that connects and provides that continuity, because that team would be familiar with a person, whether they connected with them in the criminal justice system or outside. But you know, that one care coordinator will be focused and dedicated to that spot. We are doing the same thing, for example, with that team and connecting with clients at the community shelter, for example, right? So this sort of expanded idea of having a navigational team outside of the hospital, outside of Burton Ash, to make sure that there's a piece in place this is the people don't fall through the cracks in the system concept.
This is Commissioner Reed here. I have similar questions to what Commissioner Portillo brought up, and I'm furthermore curious about any barriers or kind of stumbling blocks you see with having an embedded contracted position in terms of different confidentiality requirements, what the functionality of, you're talking about it as a team function, but people who work for Heartland RADAC have very different confidentiality requirements, like extremely different. So I'm a little hung up on that and worried about the barriers that will create to an actual team approach at problem solving that involves the multiple players, so to speak, that this person in criminal justice services may be interacting with. And then I guess furthermore, I'm curious, especially based on Bob's comments, is the idea that this care coordination continues beyond somebody completing their probation or their enhanced diversion or whatever it is that they're receiving supervision for.
I think the hope there would be a soft handoff to the community side of the world versus the criminal justice side of the world. I know there's care coordinators in other criminal justice departments across the state, and they will probably have to work through some of the confidentiality issues. But getting releases signed by clients, we feel like we confidently can do that. It's worked in other locations and pretty successfully. So I'm not that concerned about it at this point. If we were the first, maybe I'd be a little more worried, but I know other people are doing the same kind of thing and it's working really well. I just want to make sure we're giving everybody an opportunity to be successful. And even when they leave us, that they still have the supports necessary to maintain success without coming back to the criminal justice system to gain the support that they need. And that's been the tendency, is you fail till you get what you need. And I want to stop that cycle of doing that. We need to be meeting people's needs right where they are and not moving them up the system to more restrictive kind of supervision. And we want to do this in coordination with court services. I mean, I anticipate our barrier reduction funds can be used for court services clients, can be used for our clients, and the same, with care coordination. If they have a client who really needs some coordination, I want them to feel comfortable. And we haven't really worked that out, but I have every confidence we can and will, because I don't want court services clients to have to come to community corrections or vice versa. We want this to be fairly seamless. And I know the DA's desire is kind of have a better flow. Like if you're in enhanced diversion and we determine you really could benefit from drug court, you could shift. It wouldn't be such a dramatic situation where you have to go from, we can make it pretty seamless since it's all under one department. We think it can work.
Commissioners,
I do.
we can also, Heartland Radak's coming in a couple days to talk under behavioral health projects, but we could certainly follow up with them so that when they come in a couple days, that if there are specific things, Jason could tell us about how he thinks this would work, and confidentiality issues and being embedded. Mike's understanding is they have experience doing this at other parts of the state. So that's something we can follow up on and bring to you a little bit later if that's helpful.
This is
And Commission, oh, no, go ahead, Commissioner Patil. I'm sorry, Commissioner. If I could just add one piece on the confidentiality piece, and which is a very important point, Commissioner Reed, is, we've been doing this out at the jail for over a past decade. And so with Bert Nash and with DECA and the reentry program, and then the officers and also the medical staff. And so and you're correct, Commissioner Reed, we had to establish boundaries, and based on, let's say DECA, when they get to this point in the assessment process, now there's no more communication regarding that client until releases are signed. And so we worked with our, whether it be attorneys or professional staff on 42 CFR to make sure that we were clear at what point that would occur. And then we had to communicate that to the entire team so that everyone knew where that boundary line was. And in this situation, I'm sure that's something that we'll be documenting in policy to make sure that the rules are clear around that. But it really is a good point to make sure that we're maintaining that confidentiality, because it's so important for the treatment.
I do want to go back to, this is Commissioner Portillo. I want to go back to something that Pam said as far as potential seamless movement between things like enhanced diversion, drug court. When we have a really client-centered approach, that can be really positive. But right now we don't have an institutional defender's office. And so we have very different contract attorneys who are supporting enhanced diversion, drug court. And so you have clients who have to talk with different defense attorneys who don't necessarily have a background with those teams. There's no internal communication amongst our defense bar. I'm really concerned because drug court's a heavy lift for folks. Sometimes it can provide them all the supports and everything that they need to start making pro-social choices and break cycles. But it also requires a lot of work and a lot of commitment, and clients may not always be served by that. And so they need to have an advocate who understands the differences between these programs and an advocate who can help them really understand the choices that they're making between these programs. So I have a lot of concerns about how we push clients into different programs without having an institutional defender's office who works across these programs and has a complete understanding of the different teams, team dynamics, and expectations for clients.
Commissioner Portillo, I would agree completely with that. I mean, I have those concerns myself. That's why we've talked about the public defender office. That's been an issue since the get-go, even at first appearance. We don't have counsel, and we do provide the court and the district attorney's office with our recommendations for pretrial release. And without counsel, sometimes I'm thinking the benefits for the client aren't necessarily there. But I will say our concurrence rate for release is well over 80%. So most people are getting released to pretrial supervision. It might be less restrictive if they'd had counsel. But yeah, I completely concur with your thought process on that. It is a concern because there's not a lot of communication. We do a lot of education with the defense bar, and we're going to be doing some more education with the district attorney's office about pretrial and ICOTS and other things that they don't really understand. And we're trying to kind of, now that the staff is fully up to speed, we're going to be doing some training later this month with the DA staff, and we meet regularly with the defense bar. But it's only as good as those who attend and then understand what they're hearing. But we are definitely open. We encourage people to call us if they have questions, and we do try and provide everything to defense counsel that we're doing, the rant and the scoring, and anybody who's there, we're going to give it to them.
That leads me to one other question. Mike mentioned that the RADAC position will be a licensed clinician who can do diagnoses. What are the expectations then around how this position will be doing kind of diagnosis work and that clinical work? Because what I was reading was mostly around care coordination. And I think that clinical work and coordination work are very different areas, and coordination, it makes sense to me to be part of CJS. The clinical work seems like that's something that we do. We don't have that clinical supervision within the criminal justice system.
Well,
Can you help me understand where that line is here?
Well, hopefully my thinking was the clinical piece would help us expedite getting people to service sooner, because sometimes we're waiting for various evaluations and things to be completed. We're going to need to staff as a group. So we're using this person's time most effectively, and we're not just referring everything willy-nilly there. We're going to be as soon as we know we're going to have that position, we're going to be sitting down with Jason and talking about protocols in terms of who we should serve with that person, so that we're using this person to the best of our ability, and that we're not sending them clients that really aren't going to benefit from their service. So a lot of that's really kind of still to be determined, because we haven't, I don't want to get the cart before the horse and start planning for something I don't actually have. But I have every confidence. I mean, Jason's been in communication with me a couple of different times. He sent me the data that they collect in Shawnee County on doing the same kind of project. And it's pretty impressive what they've been able to accomplish.
If you'd be willing to share those data with
Yeah,
us, I'd really appreciate that.
I'll send that to you.
Thank you.
And just Commissioner Patil, this is Mike Brower, just to add to that, is this won't, this is a licensed clinician, but this will not be someone who's providing ongoing therapy. Their services that they provide will be acute in nature for the purpose of getting someone connected to the appropriate services. And they are not a long-term service provider. And for some of those services, assessment by a licensed clinician is required for admission into those services. And so that's the purpose of having a licensed clinician.
So I know that there are federal probation offices that are actually hiring licensed workers as probation officers. Is that something that would be a possibility for us, so that we could have that licensed worker who is also a probation officer, which would obviously mean a different potential pay structure for the probation officers. But then again, that's something that's in office, being able to connect folks rather than having a contracted out person.
I think we'd need to do more investigation in terms of what level of supervision they're required to have, because I don't have the alphabet soup behind my name. So I'm not sure whether I would even be able to supervise somebody that's at that status. So I think those are the kinds of determinations we need to make, so that we're not planning for something that we actually can't accomplish because we don't have the right credentials to supervise the staff member, if that makes sense. We can definitely look into it.
My question is Commissioner Kelly. My question may be more for Sarah and Mike. I like what it sounds like, which is the direction of kind of combining enhanced diversion, behavioral health court, and drug court into one package. Is that what I heard you say? I mean, it's sort of, they are separate, and I understand. Go ahead. Looks like you're about to
Well,
correct me.
enhanced diversion is really like the district attorney has an unsupervised kind of self-directed diversion. This is for folks who who need more support than that to accomplish what they need to accomplish. And it might be somebody who wouldn't qualify for drug court, but could benefit from some of the services that would be drug and alcohol treatment, assessment, et cetera. And so it's really, folks in enhanced diversion aren't really specialty court material, we don't think. But there could be cases where once we start working with them, we realize their problems are more significant than we first realized. And so then we would encourage drug court and behavioral health court to take a look at that client to see if they might be better served.
I think big picture, though, Commissioner Kelly, you're right. Our intent here is to have a source, an account of funds that can be used across the system, across the variety of clients seen by CJS in our district court system, and that we provide the right treatment that they need at that time based off of what their needs are. That it's not just silos of, no, this is behavioral health court, no, this is enhanced diversion, this is drug court.
They're all diversion.
They're right. And so the intent would be to try to, just have those resources available so that they can be best utilized where they're needed. That's the intent.
Yeah, that I'm really excited because it did seem like we were putting things into silos early on. And we even discussed last year, I think, that we may not be making the best use of our administration on this because we were putting them into separate pockets. With that in mind, it struck me when I was looking at the numbers that are in drug court now and your projection of 10 more. And so you budgeted based on that 10. I'd like to hear some more narrative, just like how you got from where we are today and thinking in the next year, we're going to have 10 more people in that program. And then I guess the DA is not here, but are they on the schedule? I mean, one of my questions was enhanced diversion. I mean, we had a study session on it, but I didn't have a real confident sense of how many people we would think would be involved and how that would also impact our, it seemed like it would impact a lot of those who were on house arrest. And so I was just interested in the budget exchange there.
So before Pam responds, I
Yeah.
guess I want to sort of answer that. Part of the reason why I placed this as $250,000 in the commissioner's budget is because we are still working on some of these
Okay.
issues. Enhanced diversion as a program is not fully fleshed out and vetted yet. So I'd like to keep it there until you're able to have a separate work session, have that conversation specifically about how that program would work and how those dollars would work. So that's part of the reason why I
Okay.
didn't schedule that to happen today, was because I didn't want the commission to feel pressured that we have to be 100% comfortable with the program as outlined. But I want you to be comfortable enough that you can approve the funds in the budget.
There you
So
go.
I understand the
Yeah.
tug and the pull there. So
Mhm.
I'll let Pam answer the specifics, but we can follow up on this. And if we need to bring other folks in at a later date.
Okay.
I would definitely say that drug court, they're impacted by the district attorney. And so we had the end of one DA's career with us, and then we started a new person, then there was a huge shift in staff. So we've had some issues in terms of referral and getting things moving along. The one benefit I think I've seen with enhanced diversion is that they make the referral to my staff that they think they want to be reviewed for enhanced diversion, and we do a quick RANT, risk assessment triage. And we've determined a number of those folks that they find are low, then they move them over back to the regular diversion. So it's been really helpful to get their risk score. So we put them in the right place. So we're not over supervising, but we're not under supervising. And so that's one of the benefits that I've seen. And that is on one of my goals for next year, is that we look at possibly doing the rant sooner so that we have that information even at first appearance. So we can be, and we've talked with the stakeholder group for pretrial last week and talked about having some check boxes on the pretrial release recommendation report that says, this is a checkbox, this person might be good for BHC or drug court or enhanced diversion. And we'd check the box so that the defense counsel would know once they receive the report that we think this person might be a good candidate. And also will alert the district attorney staff that we think this person could be a good candidate based on what we've seen in terms of their history. So what we're trying to do is figure out how to expedite folks to the right program sooner than the lingering time. And we still have those issues even in behavioral health court and drug court. The time from the referral to the actual getting into the program seems to take longer than it should. And so we're hopeful we can kind of get some of that stuff moving a little sooner. When we talked about the budget, this is where I'm talking about that drug court DECA money all being in one group so that we're not over budgeting and we're not under budgeting. So we're anticipating that 85% of those folks won't have a payer source. That's a very conservative estimate. And so the remaining 15% we will use for enhanced diversion clients who could benefit from drug and alcohol treatment or drug and alcohol assessment and have a payer source for that from us to try and get those things expedited. Because drug court only serves felons. So we know there will be a number of people with misdemeanors that have drug issues or alcohol and drug use issues that could benefit from some support to avoid deeper involvement in the criminal justice system. We're trying to divert as many folks as we know how.
This is Commissioner Reed. I just wanted to piggyback off that a little bit and ask, well, I had the opportunity to visit drug court recently, and there were 9 participants currently, and I know we've been budgeted in this pilot year for 15. Have you ever, I don't think we've been at full capacity as far as I know, but do you know what the highest number has been? And can you speak to how much fluctuation we've seen in
I
that
think
number?
the highest number has been 12. And I think, the hard thing about that is, with COVID, it was really, really difficult to manage the program and provide the level of support we felt the clients needed, and also hold them accountable with a lot of drug testing. So that's been the biggest issue. And then, like I said, we changed DAs midstream. I know Judge Huff has said that maximum she ever wants in drug court is 25. And there's going to be some fluctuation as people graduate. And we know there are a number of names that are out there that we're pending, waiting for them to get into the program. And not exactly certain of what the delay is in terms of getting those folks started. Some of that may be counsel, getting things organized and understood in terms of getting those folks in the program.
This is Commissioner Portillo. I do also just want to confirm that we are keeping data on who has been referred,
Yes,
who has been accepted, and who has been rejected.
we just keep that data on every single program. Who's been
Fantastic.
referred, who's been accepted, even enhanced diversion, who we've assessed, and then what program they went to if they didn't come to us.
Including if they leave drug court for any reason,
Yeah, if they opt
they're
out of it,
exited
or if
or-
they exit because of additional criminal issues or things like that. Yeah, we keep track of everything. Sure.
Do commissioners have other questions about either the embedded care coordination position or the expanded drug court funding? Pam, I believe those are all of your supplemental requests.
Thank you very much for your time.
Correct. Okay. Well, we're moving a little ahead of schedule. That's awesome. Mike, do you want to go ahead and kind of start the conversation about institutional indigent defense? And I scheduled some time here today so that I could have Mike give the group a little bit of an update as to what the work group's been working on. And then we can talk about, this is again, one more piece. It's not complete as we approached budget. And so we can give an update. Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, hello again, Commission. So on to another topic. As you were, we in August of last year, Kansas Bids did a presentation to the CJCC on institutional defender's office, and then there seemed to be a fair amount of interest in looking at what is best for Douglas County. Then in February this year, Kansas Holistic Defenders did an additional presentation to the CJCC, which then we followed up with a study session with you in March. And at the end of that study session, the commission wished for us to put together a work group that would focus on learning more about indigent defense services and what types of models are available and what our data looks like, and and really having a discussion about what would be in the best interest of serving Douglas County. And so that commission or that work group has been meeting monthly. And just for your refreshment, I'll go list the names of the members of that work group, starting with Commissioner Portillo, from the district court, Judge Hanley, Judge Donovan, Sarah Plinsky, who's with us today, Pam Wagen, who's also with us today, from Kansas Holistic Defenders, Sam, Allison, Natalia, Carrie Nice, our reentry director with the Sheriff's Office, Jason Hess, CEO of Heartland Radak, to really focus on our care coordination of services that are available. From the DA's office, Josh Seiden, from Kansas Bids, Heather Cessna and Brandon Barrett, representing the Douglas County Defense Bar, Blake Glover, and then also just joining us recently is from the federal defense office in Topeka is Melody Brannon, and then Matt Cravens, the data analyst for the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, and myself. And so we've been focusing on, identifying what we see as opportunities to do this work, provide better service to the citizens of Douglas County in this area. And we've also then been looking at what are the different models of providing indigent defense services around the country. What's the data specific to Douglas County, and is regarding the amount of usage of defense services. And then, and so the, I don't want to have a strong update for you today in the fact that the work group is still working. And so, we're not ready to share findings with the commission or any type of recommendations, which I know makes it really difficult for you in making any kind of budget decisions. So, I'll let Sarah discuss her ideas about that. But essentially, kind of where we're at is that the commission, or that the work group, at the advice of Judge Hanley and Judge Donovan, said that they just didn't want to feel pressured into making a decision for what type of services are best for Douglas County in such a short period of time, that they wanted about 6 months to do so. They stated this in May. That would take them into the fall. And the reasoning for that was twofold. One is, they're not really sure how things are emerging out of COVID as we begin to resume full services of the court, and what the impact and changes to the court that COVID may have created. And then the other is, Judge Donovan was sworn into office just a week before the court was shut down for the pandemic. And so, having practiced previously in Topeka, she really felt like she needed more time to understand the defense services in Douglas County. So that is kind of the timeline that we're working on. And just on that piece, I was going to see if Commissioner Portillo or Sarah Plinsky are part of that work group wanted to add anything to my brief update here.
This is Commissioner Portillo. Mike, I really appreciate that overall update. I do think that there are a number of pieces that the work group has made significant progress on. And so part of that is what we just heard from Pam's discussion around our alternatives to incarceration, some of our specialty courts, and focusing around institutional defense, working across some of those specialty courts. I think one of the bigger issues that we are facing as a work group really is on the administrative side of this work. And so who makes decisions about what from a budgetary perspective and an implementation perspective? So I'm really appreciative of Heather Cessna from BIDS being a part of that, so we can really get that state level approach to our felony work. But then we also have county level misdemeanor work, and what does that look like? And then really thinking through, how does the county from a budgetary perspective work with the district court? So we're approving funds, but the district court is really coordinating how we implement indigent defense services. So I think a big part of what we're working through isn't necessarily what type of defense we want in Douglas County, but how do we actually go about doing the funding and implementation of services that work best for our community and for our system. So I'm deeply appreciative of everyone coming together and having those conversations and working across these different areas. So I think that a big part of what we as a county commission need to decide at this particular moment is how do we allocate funding as part of our budgeting process to continue to move these things forward, and where can we make progress now, and where do we need more time and more effort and more collaboration to make long-term progress. So I think that's a big challenge that faces the three of us up here.
So with that challenge in mind, as I began to prepare the proposed budget, I want to call the commissioner's attention specifically, like on your budget request report on page 11, you'll see what the county currently budgets for misdemeanor legal defense under the district court budget. And that number has gone up this year with the transfer of funds from criminal justice services. So that increase in that line from 425 to now 490 is not reflective of additional funds. It's simply reflective of the transfer. Because we are really at a stage where it's difficult to know exactly how much of those funds would be used in an institutional defenders. You would still need panel attorneys, you would still need conflict attorneys. It's a little difficult to know. But some of those funds would be available to be used in an institutional defense situation for misdemeanors. Also, I mean, commissioners can look back at the history on that line item. I feel pretty comfortable that budget is pretty sufficient. Our highest year of hitting that budget was in 2018, and it was still significantly lower than the budgeted amount. So I feel like there's some room in there too to help accommodate this. So but I knew it wasn't going to take care of everything. So I set aside $200,000 from the funds that we had held aside for jail operations to work to augment these funds. That 200,000 sits in the commissioner's budget. I don't think that's sufficient alone to do what is needed in terms of some sort of institutional defense options. But in addition to these, I feel like this is probably as good of a budget number as I can come up with at this point. And I don't know, I guess I'd invite Mike or Commissioner Portillo to talk a little bit more about what Heather Cessna mentioned at the last work group meeting about a proposal from bids and the timing on that. From what I understand, bids will be preparing their budgetary requests for next year in August of this year. Lovely timing after our budget's already decided. So I think that also plays into this, because I think one of the concerns that we've talked through is that Douglas County probably is not large enough for 2 institutional defenders. But we have some complexities here when we're dealing with a state system that we don't control.
So this is Commissioner Portillo. I think that there are a whole bunch of things in there that we need to kind of flesh out a little bit. The first is just around what are the pieces that we're looking at potentially funding. And there are 2 places where we see funds for potential institutional indigent defense here at the county level that we could collaborate with Kansas Holistic Defenders on, and that's around misdemeanors and then potentially specialty courts. We also have another supplemental request from the district court specifically around behavioral health court that's currently using contract attorneys. As we heard from Pam in the previous discussion, I do think we need to talk about how do we think about our specialty courts and specialty programs overall, and an institutional defender that would be locally with Kansas Holistic Defense. There are multiple places where we see kind of those funds popping up in this budget. The other pieces around bids and the timeline. So what Heather has shared with us are kind of 2 different pieces. So the Board of Indigent Defense Services focuses on felony defense, and that's state funded, but we would be looking at, and we have officially requested that they consider a public defender's office for Douglas County. That's a long-term process. So they would look at starting to study that issue in August and start having public hearings with our defense bar, with our public, around the potential of locating an institutional defender's office here. That would take a full year of study from August. In our last work group meeting, Heather also brought up the potential of having kind of a pilot project of a managed panel system. So right now, our panel attorneys are completely at the discretion of our judges. So judges are the ones going over the panel, deciding who's on the panel and then who gets cases. This would be a managed panel pilot where bids would actually manage the panel and look at qualifications, and then would also be doing some enhanced professional development for our panel attorneys and create some of the benefits of having that institutional defender piece. We would essentially be a pilot project for that for other areas of the state. That's something where then long-term, we would be looking at, do we have a public defender's office? Do we have a managed panel system? One thing that we're kind of talking about, these three different areas, Kansas Holistic Defenders has been a part of the conversations with Heather Cessna as well. So I don't think we're looking at a long-term having multiple institutional defenders offices, but we are looking at what is a short-term solution. So we get some of the benefits of institutional defense here in Douglas County, both at the misdemeanor level with our specialty courts and with the felony level. And then long-term, what's the best long-term solution for our criminal justice system, working with both the state level and then what we control here locally. Is that all now completely clear or just messier than ever?
It's messy work. I mean, I think that would just be par for the course. I mean, we're trying to figure it out. So I appreciate your approach to that, Sarah. I think, you know, the timelines are never perfect. And so I appreciate the background, Commissioner Portillo. But yeah, that sounds about right for government work. Yeah.
I just have a couple of questions that I wrote down that I wonder if folks from the work group might have answers to or could follow up with later. I know when we had our study session back in the spring, we didn't quite have numbers, I don't think, about any sort of average caseloads now or known a number of like each panel appointed attorney, approximately how many court appointed cases are they carrying? And just, I think that those numbers would be helpful. I don't know if we know them yet. And then I also remembered that we had talked about people with co-occurring cases that have both misdemeanor charges and felony charges. So I was just curious to know how that specific conversation thread has maybe evolved in the work group about best practices for addressing that. And I think, I mean, I saw in Kansas Holistic Defenders request that they spoke to the fact that they would have at least one or two attorneys in their office that had experience with felony convictions also to account for that. So I'm just curious about more of that, because I do think it's something to think about, and how we don't want to silo or pretend that people only get charged with misdemeanors or only get charged with felonies and kind of label them and their needs as such without recognizing the complexity of that.
This is Commissioner Portillo. I do see that our Chief District Judge, Judge McCabery, is here. And so I think that the question around data, that is a longer term question of how are we actually collecting data and analyzing what's happening with our contract attorneys. And as far as I know, we don't have good data on that, nor are we seeing a lot of kind of long-term data collection. I think no matter what our decisions are budget-wise, we need to work on how are we collecting better data about our contract attorneys and the panel attorneys. That piece when it comes to how do we work with individual clients who have both misdemeanor and felonies, I think that's where it's been really a really important part of the work group, where we have those conversations with Heather Cessna from BIDS, with Sam from Holistic Defenders, so that we can get kind of how do we have that continuity of service. But that is one where we need to focus on how do we actually handle implementation, because that is a question of, we have judges who are appointing panel attorneys for felonies. And so making sure that we can kind of collaborate across the felony and misdemeanors.
And with the potential of that pilot program for managed panel. Do we have a sense of timeline? If we were to do that, do we have a sense of timeline when we'd roll that out and be able to see what kind of impact it has?
So this is Commissioner Portillo. So that is one where Heather Cessna will be presenting on that potential pilot on July 13th. So, right after we go over our budgets, but we're hoping that that pilot would be able to be implemented this year as we're doing the overall study for an institutional defender's office within the county. But that's really a question of where does BID's budget stand currently?
She knocked it out of the park. I don't really have anything to add.
Well, we do have a few visitors here, so I don't
Yeah.
know if we have any other
Mike,
questions.
I don't know if you
for
have
visitors.
anything on the data that you wanted to share. I know that there was, if there's anything on that too.
This is Mike Brower, Commissioners, and we did get some really solid data from the district court on the number of appointed cases for misdemeanor criminal, misdemeanor traffic. But what we don't have is the any kind of average for panel attorneys on how many cases they are being assigned per year. And certainly, I don't want to speak for Judge McCabria, but I think he's been pretty clear about his desire to have better data there, as well as several other areas. And so there's been a lot of collaboration between Dr. Cravens, our data analyst for the county, and the two staff members managing the full court system for the district court to try and improve that. And as Commissioner Portillo said, leaning on the expertise of members of this work group like Heather Cessna and Melody Brannon and Sam, Alice, and Natalia, we hope we can get those data marks or measures correct, so that if we can't go backwards and chase down some of the data, at least we can have solid data moving forward. So that would be my addition on that piece. One thing I would point out, one complication we had there was that in the data is a lot of these attorneys practice in multiple counties. So even if we are able to get the average number of cases assigned to a panel attorney in Douglas County, I would put an asterisk next to that data set because that attorney may have just as many cases in a neighboring county as well. So
This is Commissioner Portillo. I will say that that is one of the things that we have had multiple discussions within the work group on, is that because we don't have an institutional defense system or a managed panel system, we don't have a way to really provide professional development for attorneys who are part of that system in a consistent and coherent way. And we don't have a way to really see how those attorneys are managing their overall caseload or kind of that work between jurisdictions. And so that has been a big piece of this, where we see some consensus around work group members noting that this isn't just a, do we have the data? It's that we know that structurally there are things that even if we have good data, we can't have better solutions without a different structure.
I do have a few more questions. I think they're specific to Sam or anybody else who's here from Kansas Holistic Defenders, just based on their budget request.
Commission, if you will, I'd be happy to introduce Sam because you do have a supplemental request, or not supplemental, you have a public community partner request from Kansas Holistic Defenders, which will be represented by Sam, Alice, and Natalia. And do we need to kind of go over that request, or do you just want to go ahead and fire away with questions for Sam?
Let's jump into questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks for coming, Sam.
Thanks, Mike. And thanks, Sam, and others for being here. I was, speaking of data, curious about, you mentioned in 2008 and 2019, more than 600 individuals charged with misdemeanors required appointed counsel in Douglas County. Do you happen to know out of how many misdemeanor charges or individuals charged with misdemeanors that was? Like, was it a lion's share, so to speak, of the charges in our county that needed court-appointed indigent defense?
I would defer to our chief judge on this, but I believe that the number is around 85%. We did see, and Mike can also speak to this, there was some data indicating that there was a change in the overall proportion of people who were charged with misdemeanors, felonies, or traffic offenses, and how many of them qualified for defense. We saw a large drop a few years ago in the number of traffic cases. I can pull that data up. I know that you shared it with us at our last meeting, Mike, but do you happen to have that information as well?
Thank you, Sam. This is Mike Brower. I do have that provided by Judge McCabria. And, you know, a quick summary of that is from 2017 to 2020. We averaged for criminal cases, 76% of misdemeanor criminal cases received an appointed attorney. 10% of misdemeanor traffic cases received a court-appointed attorney, and 86% of essentially miscellaneous cases received a court-appointed attorney.
And I do just want to mention I'm joined here by two of our board members who are also experienced attorneys, Brandy Studer and Jennifer Roth.
Hi, nice to meet you both. So I also wanted to ask a little bit more about the parts of your proposal where you talked about fewer delays and how institutional defense can contribute to that. And so, I mean, in my experience as a court advocate, I think I can picture some ways in which that might help. The first thing that comes to mind is first appearances and the ability for somebody to have access to their appointed attorney right away and understand the options before them, including bond and what the next steps and such are. So I'm just curious if you can speak in a little more detail about some tangible things that you believe create fewer delays and how that could benefit the district court and kind of all of its offices.
Yeah, we can go into exhaustive detail with this. This is actually a presentation that we're putting together for the work group for our next session, and one that I also want to give the judges the opportunity to weigh in on before we say anything for certain. But because the question is presented, you know, the other defense offices, particularly the federal defenders, Melody Brannon has done an incredible job of making an incredibly efficient institutional defender's office. When somebody comes in, it is a matter of hours, usually, before from the time they're booked to when they see an attorney, right? This is both because they have an institutional defender that can respond effectively. It's also because they have a well-managed panel where, you know, if you were on the CJA panel, you'll get an email saying, hey, you've got, person is in jail right now. Can you get there in an hour? That's sort of the level of efficiency I think we should be striving for, right? Right now, a counsel is not appointed until first appearance. That is to say, in the same moments when bond is being set. And that counsel may or may not have contact with that client for days or weeks after that appearance. And there are institutional reasons for this, right? It is very difficult to get effective contact information and backup contact information for somebody that you've never met, right? You just get the email and you have to reach out to this person. Maybe they have the same cell phone, maybe they don't, right? Maybe they're at the same address, maybe they're not. And additionally, you know, many attorneys, you know, expect that their clients will reach out to them, but that might not happen. And frequently it doesn't. And so what we do see in the criminal parts is attorneys saying, you know, I haven't spoken to my client yet, right? I haven't gotten an offer from the DA yet that has been communicated to my client. You know, I haven't reviewed discovery yet, right? There is, even at the second appearance that occurs in the district court, over and over, right? Missed opportunities. There's always, almost always one additional continuance there, right? Our proposal would be if we have attorneys that are available at first appearances, right? To meet somebody while they're in jail, because we know exactly where they are. They're in jail. You can sit down with them at that moment, get their contact information, learn about the case, begin the investigation process, dispatch an investigator if necessary to go get video footage if this was an incident that might have video footage, and to, between that first appearance and the second appearance, have done the majority of the work on the case. That is, it is possible if attorney is assigned and meets with that client in the first, day or so after arrest, right, with booking, to have talked to the client, gotten an understanding about the case, get a basic idea of what's happening, request discovery from a DA, review that discovery, get an offer, and go into that second appearance in the district court part with an idea of where the case is going to go. Is this going to be a diversion case? Have we already applied for diversion? Or is this one that needs to be set for trial, right? Now, of course, there are going to be things that get in the way of that, but under an efficient system, there should be no reason necessarily to see regularly attorneys requesting a continuance because one of these things hasn't been done. And I'm not saying this is the fault of these attorneys. I'm just saying it is not possible to consistently do that without attorneys being appointed earlier in the process and without that contact being made earlier in the process. Does that, and I will say that there is some data to support this. So in Hennepin County, Minnesota, they also have practiced the holistic model there. There was a comprehensive study comparing the delays. There was an average of one fewer appearance for people who are represented by the institutional defender in that system. The Texas Indigent Defense Council has also done extensive study as more and more counties that are very similar to Douglas County in their size in Texas have transitioned over to institutional defenders. So this is, a thing that I think we'll have to see what can happen precisely in the system, but I think that there is some low-hanging fruit for greater efficiency, fewer court appearances, less, and that I think in turn means less crowding in those court dockets. Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
Yes, very thorough answer. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the tangible examples too. My last question was just about, we spoke on data collection, and it makes sense to me that having an institutional office will go a long way towards having that data. But I was also, my interest was piqued by the parts of the request that talked about providing training and continuing education and skill building for the entire legal community in the county. So I wonder if you could just kind of briefly talk about, or maybe explain more about why an institutional defender's office is well positioned to do that, and kind of maybe if you even have a bit of a vision about how frequently would that be, and what does hosting that look like for all members of the bar that don't work in the office?
This is Commissioner Portillo. Can I just jump in there really, really quick? I think that there are two pieces to that are really important. And one is the professional development from an institutional office, which I think is a question, and obviously one that Sam should answer. The other is that data piece, and part of what the work group has spent a lot of time on is that we can collect all kinds of data about our current system, but there's a structural difference if we have an institutional system. And so those data would be different and easier to collect because of the structural difference. But I think that that's where I just want to make sure that we're having clear conversations about kind of data collection, data analysis, and structural systems, because there are differences in what we're doing now and what kind of data we'd have access to. Like, even if we collected the best data possible in Douglas County, it would not give us a full understanding of what our defense attorneys are doing. If we move to an institutional model, we can collect better data and have a better understanding of what caseloads look like for institutional defenders. So it's not just about trying to collect more data. We can't get certain data under our current model. Just wanted that clarification.
Okay, so I want to thank you for that clarification. I'll take the sort of first question, the first part of this about the professional development. And then I might say something as well about the data. This is the reason why I think that we believe that institutional defenders are key to professional development is because we've seen it. Again, the federal public defenders are a model for this. They put out a newsletter every week describing what are all of the Supreme Court and 10th Circuit cases that came down that every good attorney that I know of practicing in federal criminal defense reads. Because they are, again, an institution, they have to know this stuff, right? They have to know this stuff to be at the top of their game. And so they have every incentive to share it, and they do. There are, for the CJA panel, there is a second chair program that takes new attorneys who are going to be new to the panel, and before they're on the panel, gives them an extensive training program that's paid. And then in their first year of being on the panel, right, they are taking only certain types of cases, and then they are developed. And the federal defenders very much not only takes care of looking at its own attorneys, right, but making sure that the overall crop of criminal defense attorneys are supported and well-trained. They also put on annual training conferences and CLEs, right? There's one coming up just this August that is an advanced trial skills program. And this type of training program is one that we have seen other defenders' offices put on. So for instance, the Bronx Defenders, where I was practicing, had something called the Defender Academy that would be put on every year for its new attorneys and opened up to attorneys from other offices. So for instance, the attorneys in the Armed Forces JAG Corps would also come train at this, right? Attorneys would be sent from other offices to come to this kind of training, right? So there is the ability of these institutional defenders offices to put on the training to gain access essentially to a national network of trainers and public defense offices who do this stuff all the time. You know, it's very easy to tap into that network, and people are very excited to come out and bring training to an area where it hasn't been before. So that part of it, so both the ability to hold these trainings, the ability to look at the landscape of attorneys and say, hey, do we need to be investing more? And the last thing is, I think KU being here also provides a really wonderful opportunity to strengthen that kind of training. So an institutional defender's office, I mean, I got my start by interning, right? Doing a summer program at the Public Defender Service in Washington, DC, right? So that we can ensure that there's a crop of new attorneys interested in defense who are getting support and working with the law school on that. So that's how I think that you know, that can be consistently provided with an institutional defender. Do either of you have anything to add on the training piece? And I know.
My name is Jennifer Roth, and I currently work at the Appellate Defender Office, which is an office within BIDS. And we provide training. Recently, there were a number of ADO employees who put together a day-long CLE that was presented to private attorneys through the KBA to try and give people a one-day crash course in how to do appeals. So we, you know, BIDS puts on trainings that are for private attorneys. So this is something that institutional defenders are used to doing and are happy to do, either informally, people call us all the time, or through CLE and other presentations. So this is an established thing that we're happy to do and do all the time.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you all.
I just have one question. It's Commissioner Kelly, and I'm glad Pam's here. So, you know, we heard just recently a request for more care coordination through criminal justice services. And then in this one, and I know we're not there yet, there's also a request for client advocate. can you tell me how those are different and why we need both of them?
Yes. So a care coordination is primarily about how the client gets through the various layers of services that are available at other points in the system, right?
Okay, stop there, Sam.
Yeah.
That's great. Can you explain how that's different than what their attorney's going to do for them?
Yes. So the idea, so the care coordination piece, right? The fact is that sometimes it's not different, but the fact is it's more efficient. So if I have a client, and I say I'm on the panel and I've got a client, and that client really needs me to, needs somebody to, get on the phone with Bert Nash, I'm going to do that, right? But my salary, right, is as an attorney is much higher than somebody who you could hire without those same credentials to do a lot of that work, right? Ultimately, if you're going to say, and this is also why we ask for a dedicated investigator, right? I'm going to have to go down to the Quick Trip and pull the video. Do you want me doing it? Or do you want to hire somebody who doesn't have as high of a salary to go out and do that for 3 attorneys at the same time? Client advocate, right? So the care coordination is one thing, right? It's primarily about navigating services. A client advocate does some of that, but a client advocate also navigates things that are not services, but that are hurdles that are thrown up by the fact of arrest. For instance, clients very frequently have a cell phone that's taken as evidence. If you have ever dropped your cell phone in the toilet, you know what a disruption in your life it can be to not have that. A care coordinator is not necessarily going to get on the phone with the police department to make sure that that person gets their phone back or their car back, right? Client advocates talk to employers, right? Hey, particularly in, if somebody is in jail, look, so-and-so is not coming into work today. They wanted to call in and let you know. That might save somebody from getting fired, right? Might allow them to continue putting food on their table. A client advocate can talk to landlords, right? And additionally, now again, there are other places in the system. There are other people working on landlord-tenant things that might be a referral on down the road, but a lot of these needs are pretty acute and pretty time sensitive, right? So where care coordination is primarily about, can we get this person into mental health services, treatment services, sorry about that, I get excited about this. It's primarily about these other types of services that we might want to enroll somebody in. A client advocate is about breaking down the barriers to success that might not be related just to entry into a service. The other points of entry that a client advocate often does really good work might be, for instance, working with schools. When client advocates have been used for juveniles, right? Having IEP integration into what they're doing there, right? Client advocates also tend to work with DCF when there's potential family court involvement, right? Having somebody who is, again, this isn't care coordination. They're not necessarily receiving services, but they do want somebody early on in the process is going to tell them, hey, what's happening here? How do you interact with this? How can we get the best outcomes on this? And somebody who also knows DCF, who can speak and help facilitate the communication early on in that process, right? So a client advocate does something, I think, fairly different. We, in our initial proposal, had also requested a social worker that would have done something much more similar to this care coordination, right? We're persuaded that we should hold off on that and see, first of all, how the existing services are interacting before we go ahead and integrate a full-time social worker into what we're doing. But the client advocate is enough of a different thing than I think we see in any part of the care system that currently exists. And I would also defer to Commissioner Reed on some of this. I mean, I think she sees first and foremost how this system actually works in practice outside and a role outside of the commission. But does that answer your question, Commissioner Kell?
It does. Pam, do you concur with that? Do you agree with that? Okay, that's helpful to me. Thank you.
This is Commissioner Reed. I think I would just add that
based on the description of the care coordination that we might get through that contracted position, that's going to be really sort of specialized or narrowed to folks who have substance use needs identified. And that's not necessarily going to be, everybody who is receiving public defense. And I think the idea of client advocate is much more, it's very client driven. It's about the listening to the client tell you what they need, not necessarily trying to figure out kind of what prescribed services need to be met in order to kind of hit certain benchmarks, maybe through their supervision or court case. And so, and I think that inherently there's probably a different level of trust that will happen for many clients, that an advocate in their attorney's office where confidentiality is a major piece of that will allow for some people to be more honest and open about the needs that they haven't met, that they may not be comfortable sharing with their adult services supervisor or a clinician who is assessing them.
If we've got no other questions, do we have any other questions? We can move on. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Sarah.
The next budget we're going to discuss, I'll turn it over to Mike to give an overview of the district court budget. And as mentioned earlier, Chief Judge McCabria and Courts Administrator Linda Kester-Vogelsang are here as well to answer any questions. Or
This is
would you
Commissioner
like a
Portillo.
small
I know
break?
that we have eaten away at our being ahead of schedule, but I'm wondering if we could just do like a quick 3-minute break before
That's
we
fine.
move on to the next
Yeah.
one.
All right, Mike, we're going to take a quick break.